Please be seated. Thank you very much. So welcome to today's full council meeting, and especially welcome to members of the public who are attending in the public gallery, those in the conference hall next door, and those watching this meeting via our YouTube channel. For those in the building, I would like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedures. Please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. As with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance and respect. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillors Classic, Crawford, Goggin, Kolar and Mack. Are there any other apologies? Yes.
And Lorraine Francis is unwell.
Thank you very much. Lord Mayor? Yes, Councillor Wilcox.
Crawford also sends his apologies.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is... Oh, sorry, Councillor Rupert. I apologise.
Councillor Martin's on his way, but is late.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Please can I ask whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council held on the 9th of July 2024 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
I rise to second the minutes and I reserve remarks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Can I take it that the minutes are agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 5 is Lord Mayor's business. Council notes the sad news that Laura Weltill has recently passed away. Laura was a tireless advocate for the rights of disabled people in Bristol. She spent over 20 years working at and eventually leading the Bristol Disability Equality Forum. She was a valued Bristol Disability Equalities Commissioner and helped create the world's first disabled person-led community climate action plan. Her passing is a great loss for the city and people with disabilities in particular. Council also notes the sad passing of Bruce Simmons, former chair of the Lord Mayor's Charity Appeal. Bruce was a well-known figure in Bristol, passionately supporting many charitable organisations across the city. He was two-time president of Clifton Rotary Club and was chairman and treasurer of the Lord Mayor Bristol Children's Appeal, which is over 100 years old, where he served for over 50 years. In that 50 years, he raised around £3 million for disadvantaged children in Bristol through donations, fundraising dinners and events, sponsorship, bucket collections, carol concerts, and much more. Bruce received the Lord Mayor's Medal in 2017 and the Guild of Guardians Charity Award in 2023. I'm delighted to say that Bruce's wife Kathy, son Ian, and members of the Charity Appeal have joined us in the chamber today. Our thoughts are with you all at this sad time, and we will all miss Bruce very much. Last month, I attended a memorial service for Bruce at Clifton.
I first came across Bruce with his elf hat on, resplendent in his Lord Mayor's Charity Appeal fluorescent tabard and shaking a bucket, enticed me to board Santa's sleigh for a trip down Park Street. Quite an impression. The charity swimming marathon where I met his lovely family and he was casually attired, thankfully not wearing his, since I discovered more lately thanks to Ian, his trademark budgie smugglers. There was my charity gala for underprivileged kids in Bristol, a cause which he had dedicated his time and energy to for a remarkable 50 years. Dressed in his tuxedo like a slightly smaller than life-size James Bond, perhaps 006 and a half. And at a Rotary Club lunch, I arrived expecting a posh meal, but thankfully it was far more to my liking. Gammon and chips. I look forward to returning there to speak, as per his wish. But the one thing he accessorised all his outfits with at all these occasions was his amazing smile. Warm, compassionate and highly infectious. It involved not just his mouth but his entire face. Indeed, as the Hokey Cokey song goes, he put his whole self in. It will always be my overriding memory of him, beaming up at me and no doubt now, beaming down on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Renard. I would now like to ask full council to stand if they wish and to observe a minute's silence. Thank you very much. Next is agenda item 6, public forum. 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, which is split into 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on our website. I'll go through the list, calling on those that have indicated they plan to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and to start to wrap up when the lights turn to amber. There were no public forum petitions received for this meeting. There were a total of 21 public statements received, and a list will be displayed on the screen. 12 members of the public indicated that they plan to attend and speak to their statements. And they are displayed on the screen, and we'll run through those statements in order. I'll invite each person to speak for 1 minute. Please summarise your statement and bear in mind they were published for councillors and the public to read in advance of the meeting. So first, do we have Suzanne or here?
Yes.
So Suzanne, your statement is on accountability and openness, and remember you have 1 minute.
Thank you. In response to a recent Freedom of Information request about meetings the ex-mayor Marvin Rees held in March 2024, the response from Bristol City Council was, "The information you requested is not held by Bristol City Council. The mayor's inbox and communications were shut down upon him leaving office. It should be possible to make an FOI request about meetings and decisions involving the recent elected mayor and to gain a response. I hope the leader of Bristol Council and the relevant officers will look into this and ensure that information is available for those who make relevant FOI requests." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. And next we have statement number 2 from Nigel Varley. Is Nigel here? No? Oh, he is. Okay. So, Nigel, your Gilton House Tenants Association cladding remediation compensation.
Right, I started making the same arguments over and over again, as you probably are of listening to them or not listening to them, as the case may be. But I do want to emphasise certain things. First of all, you say that the payment is goodwill, that is charity, which is outrageous. It's a debt that you owe us for additional heating costs caused by the council's negligence, poor planning and project management. The recent audit survey audit summary indicates contractual and planning failures by the council. Why should we carry part of the cost of these? £147 is obviously not enough in the case of Gilton House for 2 winters without insulation. You say that is all that there is in the budget, and yet you pay the contractors for budget overruns because you have to, but not to us because you think you can get away with it, and that's an abuse of power. You say that the council is broke. We suggest it sorts itself out and collects the 229 million quid it's owed by uncollected debt. Finally, we're told that the £147 is a one-off payment for this year only. The cladding remediation programme has perhaps another 8 years to run, so it affects most of the council wards represented here.
Could you
By
wrap it
what
up?
right?
Nigel, could you wrap it up now, please?
Okay, by what right does a small group fix what is in the budget for years to come?
Thank you very much. Next, we have public statement 4 from Matt Sanders. Is Matt here? Yeah. Matt, your statement is on the Cumberland Road bus gate.
Since January, the Cumberland Road bus gate has issued 55,000 penalty charge notices, so is currently the least effective bus gate in the entire country. In May, I itemised 25 faults in the design and signage, but transport officers claim that nothing was wrong, so no changes were made and another 20,000 fines were issued since then. In recent weeks, I've won 7 appeals to the Traffic Penalty Tribunal, whose adjudicators ruled that the signage was inadequate, so the transport officers' claims are now discredited, and they've added 2 new signs in Gasferry Road. The Traffic Management Act says that if a council is reviewing its signage, then it should suspend the enforcement until improvements are made. But the council has not suspended the enforcement, which is carried on throughout. My written statement also shows how, back in May, the Transport Chairman tried to impose a moral code on the issuing of multiple PCNs, but his worthy aims were frustrated by senior managers and executives whose only concern was to preserve the revenue stream. I therefore urge all councillors to study my written statement and support the Transport Chair's original proposal.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, next we've got statement number 5. Is Helen? No. Okay, so we go on to public statement 6. Melissa Topping. Is Melissa here? We might be able to come back. Okay, all right. Let's move on to public statement number 9 from Philip Morris. Is Philip here? Yeah. And this is on an abandoned vehicle.
Good evening. Good evening. I was a member of the local housing forum and the housing management board. Residents of Birchall House and Berrycroft raised the issue regarding a seemingly abandoned vehicle, a Jaguar car registration on BND 5WGT. As a result, I contacted the resident housing officer, who replied to my concerns on the 15th of April 2019 by email, which she stated the vehicle would be moved by the 29th of April. Today, when I wrote this, the 3rd of September 2025, the vehicle is still in situ. It has no road fund licence, insurance or MOT, according to the government website. This is contrary to council policy regarding council car parks. In preceding years, I've contacted housing officers by the score, all to no avail.
Philip, sorry to interrupt, Philip. Sorry, Philip. You've had your minute, I'm afraid, so we need to move on to the next person. But we have already, so thank you very much. So the next public statement is number 15 from David Redgewell on public transport. David,
Thank
1
you.
minute, please.
Be very quick, but the issue is the city. We are extremely concerned about the proposals by Bristol City Council and the West Midlands Mirror Combined Authority, it's a joint project, to remove buses from certain parts of the city centre, and particularly to remove the right turn for National Express and buses into North Somerset from outside the bus station and create a cycle lane. Disabled people need to move around the city. I'm the bus advisory panel member for equalities and diversity on Wecker and North Somerset. We are extremely concerned. We welcome that Ed Clouden wants to review all this, but we really must have access. And First Group and Stagecoach are objecting, and National Express are raising concerns. So I just asked Wecker, Mayor Dan Norris, and Councillor Clouden to work together with the other leads in the West Midlands Combined Authority area and North Somerset to find a solution that doesn't ban disabled people and makes our bus service flow very, very successfully around the city centre. It's the private car our target, not public bus services. Buses need to remain in the city centre, accessible to all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next is public statement 16 from Bonnie Welch, Saving Yew Tree Farm. Is Bonnie here? No. Okay, we move on to public statement 17, George Ferguson and others. Is George Ferguson or another representative here? No. Okay, public statement 19 from Eileen McLaughlin on the Silver Motion. Is Eileen here? No. Okay, so public statement 20, Harry Burnett, on integrity and accountability of councillors has vanished. Yes, please, 1 minute.
Good evening. Housing in Bristol, the average rent is rising at an unaffordable rate, and it seems like the council is taking a back seat on that. Decision in the council involved housing in an open meeting with no discussion or vote by a decision of the chair seems opaque and unacceptable in modern democracy. Where is the due process, or has the council resigned itself to backdoor dealings? Councillor Mack has said it's important for decisions affecting the city to have been made behind closed doors by just one person whom the public and elected councillors cannot easily challenge. How is that different now? I hope that members involved can take some time to have an introspective moment on this matter and perform their public duty to a higher standard and with audibility. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Harry. And to one from Brendan here. No. And just to check, did Melissa Topping come back? Yes, so Melissa, your statement is on stopping the EBLN until you have a majority of community in support. You 1 minute, please.
Hi, so I'm speaking on behalf of Melissa today. We're a community group that have come together to help support the disadvantaged people of the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood Scheme. We would like to request that you stop until you've got the majority of people in support of your scheme, because we have lots of disadvantaged people in the area. There'll be increased bills. The transport infrastructure isn't cheap for those people in those areas. Additionally, is a safety concern on fire engines and emergency vehicles getting through the area, as well as increasing travel time for doctor's appointments and so on. So that's our statement for today in summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. So we will now move on to public questions received. Questions received have been published and are shared on the screen. 25 questions were received from members of the public, and 15 of those have indicated they wish to attend. We will now try to cover as many questions as possible in the 15 minutes available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. When I call on you, your question will be displayed on the screen. The leader or relevant chair will reply verbally to your question. Following the reply, you will be invited to ask a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. So we'll start once again with public question 1 from Susan Audrey. And Susan, your question is on accountability and openness, and that's for Councillor Dyer to respond to. Councillor Dyer, please.
Thank you for your question, Suzanne. The Council's document retention policy applies to all officers and members irrespective of seniority and follows Local Government Association best practice. In response to the second part, in line with the Council's email retention policy, the inbox was deleted after 30 days. Email is not our recognised storage system. Documents will be kept in their relevant line of business system. And for the third part, the normal FOI process will accommodate requests for information still held, providing it is suitable for disclosure, i.e. not exempt.
So, Susan, a total of 2 wish.
Thank you. I didn't understand that. So I'm just wondering if you could explain, if somebody puts in a freedom of information request and asks to see the emails of decisions that were made in about the last 3 months of the elected mayor's tenure, will they be able to see those emails, which in the past we've always been able to see emails that were related to important decisions for the city. Can you just say, will people be able to get hold of this? Because I didn't understand your responses.
Don't know if the will respond on that in terms of email retention.
Very briefly, if I may, Lord Mayor. So the council's retention policy is, as the leader has said, applies to all councillors and staff, and the mayor's inbox will have been deleted in accordance with that retention schedule over the course of the summer. So there's not much more I can say on that, other than the fact that the email is not our recognised storage facility, and we have other document retention, case management systems and the like, where relevant materials that officers and councillors have worked on over a number of years, and information that's held in those systems would of course be searched in line with any information request that we receive. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Suzanne, did you want to ask a second supplementary?
Yes, please. I haven't had an answer. So is the answer yes or no? Are those emails stored somewhere that people could actually see them? I don't understand what you're saying. Are you saying no, those emails have completely disappeared, and if somebody did a search, they won't be able to see any emails for the last few very important decisions? Please, if the monitoring officer is going to reply, could he reply to me, and could he say yes or no as to whether those emails will be available? Thank you.
Tim, you happy to respond again?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to be clear, if we hold information that relates to the former directly elected mayor, and it's held in any of our other information storage systems, then and we receive a freedom of information that relates to that information, then we will go through the usual process of considering whether it should be disclosed or whether it is exempt from disclosure in line with our information policies. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. We now move on to public question 4 from Nigel Varley on fire safety in tower blocks. That's one question for Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you very much for your question. It's quite a lengthy answer, I'm afraid, but I'll do my best to go through step by step. So, first of all, we've put in place proactive mitigation for all blocks with the high fire risk rating, including Waking Watch. Programmes of work are being developed to identify and remediate any property without sufficient detection. And additional interim mitigations are being implemented for these properties, including letters and phone calls to inform residents. We're also progressing a sprinkler installation programme, and we are in a future programme as part of the current budget setting process. All of our flat front entrance doors have FD30 fire doors, so that's a fire standard. And routine inspection and a remedial programme has recently commenced. Residents can report any issues they may feel that they have, or if they wish to have an inspection to ensure that their doors are fully operational. Now, audibility of fire alarms depends on the evacuation strategy for the building. So where there are communal alarm systems that have been fitted and they're not linked to flats, for those with a stay-put strategy, these are audible for residents within the communal areas. Buildings and flats operating a simultaneous evacuation strategy are audible, and these systems are inspected on a weekly, quarterly and annual basis. So any remedial works required are then recorded and completed. So some blocks have only one staircase without refuges. This is true, and these configurations are reflected within the fire strategy for those blocks. On personal evacuation plans for tower block residents with limited mobility, we are progressing a person-centred fire risk assessment policy, and that will include personal emergency evacuation plans. The policy on mobility and electric scooters has a robust operating procedure, we believe, and this is going to be informed by staff within the housing service, so not requiring not requiring wardens. We're progressing the cladding removal programme. That's a priority programme, and we are working with central government departments to look at feasibility for accelerating this programme wherever it's possible. And we're introducing a new process for fire risk assessments with new specialist resource, which will improve performance with respect to this. And finally, resourcing and investing to meet the expectations of a considerable breadth and depth of legislative updates, so new legislation, new regulation that we have to conform to. That is a considerable challenge for our housing service. However, resident safety is our #1 priority, and the budget setting process will continue to reflect the need to prioritise our duty of care to our residents.
Thank you very much. Nigel, a supplementary question if you wish.
I could challenge Councillor Parsons on a number of issues there. Judging by experience, I don't think I'm allowed to do it. I'll ask two questions at the same time, if that's possible.
No, you've only got one supplementary, I'm afraid.
One supplementary question, all right,
Yeah.
I'll make the same. I'll combine it then. It's a question of timing. Do you feel that there is still a danger of a Grenfell Tower style disaster in a Bristol town? And if so, what's the timing of of this programme of remediation? I appreciate that you know things are underway, but it's timing. And when will you let residents know in their block what the programme of remediation is? Because we don't know. We've no idea how long it's going to take.
So there is, I believe, no risk of a disaster as Grenfell. Do not have the same form of cladding as Grenfell did. But we do have an ongoing remediation program and a cladding replacement program for those blocks that do have cladding that doesn't conform to the modern fire standards. So for those blocks, we have fire procedures in place like Waking Watch, like the sprinkler systems and the alarm installation program that I was discussing to make sure that all of our residents are safe. So we're progressing at pace, and we're always looking for opportunities to increase the pace at which we deliver those improvements.
Thank you. Public question 5 from Paul Wheeler. Is Paul? Thank you. So Paul, you had 2 questions for Councillor Dyer on the Council's pay policy. Councillor Dyer, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As part of its pay policy statement, the Council has adopted a ratio of 10:1 between the highest and lowest wages, and remains committed to staying within this limit. The Council pays no less than the real living wage as set by the Living Wage Foundation, which has increased substantially in recent times in line with the rising cost of living. For the second part of your question, pre-existing recruitment and retention challenges have increased in intensity in recent years, which means that on occasion the Council needs to engage agency workers or interims at pay rates above those that would apply to permanent post holders. This occurs in professional or registered roles as well as at senior leadership level. Appointment at director, executive director and chief executive levels are made with the involvement of a selection committee of councillors. Chief executive approval is required for all agency worker interim engagements where the pay rate is at or above that of a permanent director.
Paul, you've got 2 supplementaries if you wish.
My supplementary is the leader didn't actually give any commitment, as I'd asked for, to a reduction in the highest to lowest pay ratio. So can he answer that? Is the council committed or not to continuing to reduce the pay ratio year on year? And secondly, I would ask, would he also comment on whether the council would adopt a policy of not paying above the highest paid member of staff for interim appointments off payroll?
Okay, the first one, our ratio is 8.58 to 1, so we have reduced it from that original target of 10 to 1. Wherever possible, we'll seek to reduce it further. We will also want to look at ensuring that we can do that in a way that also allows us to deliver the services. So I can't commit to saying that we'll do that year on year, but what I would say is we will endeavour to try to do that as often as possible to keep that pay ratio at or below the current level. In response to the second question, we are moving towards reducing our reliance on interims and agency staff. In fact, in a few moments' time, we'll be appointing permanent positions for our Chief Executive Officer and Chief Finance Officer, subject as long as that gets the approval of full council. Often when we employ interims, they're often very experienced and they are employed for a particular role, and because that level of experience and expertise, often the rate that is being paid will be higher, particularly because it will be a day rate rather than a salary.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dyer. So we'll move on to public question 7 from Matt Sanders on busgate enforcement. And there were 3 questions for Councillor Plowden. Councillor Plowden, do you want to take all 3 at once?
Sure, yeah. I'm going to read a bit of the answer I've got is just a date, so I thought it'd be helpful if I read a bit of the question out just for everyone. So since the 3rd of October 2023, parking services are issuing premature reminder letters for bus lanes and busgate PCNs, excuse me. Since the same date, similar letters have been issued in relation to parking offences, but not, for CAS penalties, but not for parking offences, because that was never incorrectly put in place. And then, has received premature reminder letters. The lane 69 PCNs were affected. For CAS, 215 PCNs were affected. Is only 2 of many different progression paths that are incorrectly configured within a 21-day schedule rather than the correct 28-day schedule. This issue was corrected in early September as soon as it was brought to our attention by Mr. Sanders. So I'd like to thank you, Matt, for your incredible persistence and hard work and helping us get it right. Because this is obviously important. The area, I could go on to say that the error really only occurred for a small number of people who had challenged their fine and not been successful in that challenge to the council. The impact of this was that appellants were mistakenly given the impression that they no longer had time to appeal to the independent adjudication service when in fact they still had a week to do so. And I'd like to apologise for any confusion or inconvenience caused by this mistake.
Matt, you've got 2 supplementaries should you wish.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. I came here not expecting to get any numbers or dates or anything, so thank you very much. I actually brought this matter to the council's attention in July as part of somebody's appeal to the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. So the Parking Services Department were notified at that point of this procedural impropriety and obviously carried on issuing the letters for another 2 months after that. I suppose the supplementary question could be who told you that it was in September. And also, I've been helping, I don't know, about 20 people perhaps with parking, with traffic penalty tribunal cases. and I've seen 7 of these letters relating to bus lanes and bus gates. So if the council only issued 69 of them in relation to the, I estimate must be over 100,000 bus lane fines that have been issued in the last 12 months. It's been going on for 12 months.
Matt, can you get your question as quickly as possible, please?
Okay, my question is, I don't believe it, and who told you these numbers?
I don't believe it. I don't think it's a question. The answer is, it says here that the answer was written by parking manager and signed off by Sean Taylor, head of highways. I do think it's worth saying that the people that are affected by this were people who had challenged and been unsuccessful in challenging the council's decision. So there's probably a much higher propensity that they would be maybe going on to deal with the tribunal. So I think that's probably maybe not a random sample of people, but quite a purposeful sample of people, many of whom may subsequently have been in contact with you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Plowden. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so the next on David Redwell, 8, and that's on Down Railway Station. There are actually 3 questions here, again, for Councillor Plowden. Councillor Plowden, back to you again.
Hi, Dave. Well, I was going to answer your questions. So an EQI was carried out on the New Ashley Down station, but it didn't include the bus stops in depth because they were not part of the scheme itself. In fact, it didn't even include thinking about the width of the Concord Way because that was not part of the scheme itself. The current issues with the bus stops relate to plant growth from Network Rail land, so we're liaising with Network Rail and WECA to resolve this issue and ensure that the vegetation is cut back. We're also reviewing the function and design of these stops as part of the Miller Road scheme that's currently under development, and of course, as any development within the City Council's control will take a full EQI will take place. So that's your answer to your first question. The second question was about your statement, really, wasn't it, about the right-hand turn. So First Group have been consulted at various points during the development of the city centre proposals, and specifically in relation to the proposals around Lower Magdalen Street and egress from the bus station. We've noted the first bus response, and the consultation will consider and we will consider it alongside all the other representations. All options for the design of Union Street, Lower Magdalen Street and Junction will be considered to achieve the aims of the projects and deliver benefits as sustainable transport modes. If relevant, staff from First Bus, National Express and Flixbus, if relevant staff, request a meeting, then Bristol City Council will of course consider it, but can't speak for the Metro Mayor. I'm pleased to say that we've had 1,938 responses to the consultation, and we're going to work through those proactively, and I personally will be taking responsibility to make sure that we're doing that in a proper way, so that it might be best for anyone that wants to contact us for a meeting to wait until we've had that time to consider our responses and make those clear to people. And then the third question is, on the 23rd of September, leaders of Bristol City Council, Bath and North East Somerset Council and South Gloucestershire Council wrote to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government in support of North Somerset's expression of interest in joining the West of England Combined Authority.
David, you've got 2 supplementaries, should you...
So I welcome, but even tonight, as a wheelchair user, and Brendan Taylor would have been here, but I think he's stuck in the water. Neither of us can get on and off the bus, and I'm pleased to tell me it's Network Rail at Ashley Down Station to Southmead Hospital. I wonder if we can push Network Rail to cut. They're part of the station, part of the station development. So if we can ask them to cut that bus stop, I'd be extremely grateful.
Consider it done.
And my second question, really, I understand the relationship with First Bus and Stagecoach, which are our local providers. My concern is that my contact's been with National Express. This is a major hub for the Southwest. It's economic development. Flix go in there as well, but they don't run the network that National Express does. They keep full-time staff there, and it runs 24/7, more or less, out of that bus station. I wonder if you would consider having a conversation with the directors of National Express. It's that one particularly worries me because it's time critical interchange, and they go out via the city centre, via the bus gate, and out onto the wider southwest, and I believe some of them go to South Wales. So that's really my question: is the coaches, and can you talk to Western Gateway and Peninsula about the coaches? Thank you.
I think we're taking the responses from companies very, very seriously, and I think I'm really happy to meet anyone relevant to my role. But I think it'd be best for us to work through these, make the amendments, and see if that's still if that's still a problem for the operators.
Thank you very much. Concludes the questions from members of the public. A reminder that written replies will be published on our website in the next 10 days for all public questions received. Sorry if you didn't have time to speak today. I'd like to inform members of the public that the adjournment for today's meeting is expected at 7:20, and I invite you to remain if you'd like to hear the other agenda items. If not, please can you leave as quietly and as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. No, you mustn't. Thank you. We're now moving on to agenda item. We are now moving on to agenda item 7, petitions note.
Yes, I must. I submitted a statement in proper time of this meeting.
Please can I have order in the public gallery? If the disruption to the meeting continues, I will have no choice but to adjourn the meeting. Okay, agenda item 7 is petitions. Agenda item 7 is petitions. Please can I have order in the public gallery? This is my final warning. If the disruption continues, I will adjourn the meeting. You are disrupting democracy. Please sit down. Agenda item 7, petitions notify. Members, I apologise for the disruption to the meeting. We're going to adjourn the meeting shortly while we clear the public gallery. Can I ask members of the public to go through to the conference hall next door? You'll be guided through to the conference hall. Once the gallery is cleared, we'll then resume with the meeting. Thank you very much. I think I've said this before, but it's agenda item 7, petitions notified by councillors, and there were no councillor petitions received for this meeting. So let's move on to agenda item 8, which is the annual report of Audit Committee. This report is for noting, and I'd like to call on Councillor Tim Rippington to present the report as Chair of Audit Committee. Councillor Rippington, you've got 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Andrew Brown for the leadership of the Audit Committee and for his help in passing on his knowledge to me when I took over. I'd also like to thank the entire internal audit team for their continued hard work to ensure that our systems are resilient and fit for purpose. They do an excellent job. We have a number of new members on the committee this year, so the annual report and the effectiveness report produced by the committee, which was brought to full council on the 12th of March, have both provided us with some much needed counsel on areas of concern and areas where we can improve as a committee. Not unsurprisingly, this report concludes that the Council continues to operate in an environment characterised by increased demand for public services and limited government funding, resulting in significant pressures in meeting key priorities and delivering balanced budgets. We all know that the environment in which the Council operates is an incredibly difficult one, and it is really important that the internal and external audit teams continue to focus on areas of concern and highlight them to both the Council's management and to the Audit Committee. I think it would be remiss of me today not to highlight the amount of work that comes to the committee, something that our members are acutely aware of. At the last Audit Committee, the papers ran to 558 pages, so picking out areas of concern directly is a challenge. We are therefore reliant on our colleagues in internal and external audit to provide the reassurance we require that things are operating as they should and to direct us to areas of concern. This meeting will see the establishment, hopefully, of a committee model review group, and we will certainly be feeding into this group the concerns that have already been raised about the operation of the new system, and in particular the possible conflicts of interest for members who both sit on policy committees to help develop policy, and also the Audit Committee, which reviews the effectiveness of these policies. That said, I recommend this report to Council for noting.
Thank you, Councillor Rippington. And now let's call David Wilcox to speak for the Green Group. David.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As one of the longest serving members of the Audit record I share with Councillor Hucker, I welcome, and of course I'd like to thank the outgoing Chair of the Audit Committee, Councillor Andrew Brown, for his work. I'd like to thank the officers of the audit team, Simba Muzawi and Alison Mullis and Phil Eames, Barry Morris from Grant Thornton for providing external audit documentation and recommendation, and the members of the committee for engaging with more than 1,021 pages of documentation since May. Grant Thornton has raised 2 red risks of significant value for money weakness about the Council's financial sustainability, relating to the direct schools grant and the housing revenue account, along with approving economy and efficiency and effectiveness about contract breaches. There is also an amber concern about the governance related to planning and social housing maintenance, items that have been monitored by Westminster, or the Council has self-referred itself to the housing regulator. I would also like to draw attention to a number of internal audit reports that have been brought to the committee since May and cover the previous administration's tenure that have been given a limited assurance. Children placed in unregistered provisions, education other than at school for payments made by arrangement, records management service, savings delivery, corporate business continuity planning, housing investment programme and maintaining homes, Section 106 arrangements and the community infrastructure levy, and finally licensing income. But there's also the no assurance rating given for petty cash transactions or impress account management in council parlance. These are really concerning. This number of limited assurance reports is unprecedented in my previous 3 years on the committee, and this is extremely concerning for councillors and residents alike. Councillors robustly question the relevant officers on these reports, and we will be monitoring progress.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. And now on Councillor Andrew on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, and I'd like to Councillor Rippington for their kind words. Now, it would be easy for me to rehash my last speech as Audit Chair that I gave in response to the report on the audit work for the in 2023-24, and that speech that I made in March, which is hard to believe is just 6 months ago. In that speech, I sought to highlight some of the key challenges for the committee going forward, recognising the importance and independence of audit following the change in governance, its role in providing assurance that the new system is working, and developing cross-cutting work to ensure that the West of England programmes delivered by or in Bristol are effective. And Councillor Rippington has already mentioned about the role audit will play in feeding into the committee review committee. I also sought to highlight two areas of particular concern raised by our external auditors, and Councillor Wilcox has mentioned them with regard to the significant weaknesses in our financial sustainability and our ability or otherwise to improve the economy, efficiency and effectiveness of the Council. Now, just because I'm no longer on audit does not mean I'm no longer interested, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on these indicators as the 23-24 audit process continues. Relating to this is the internal auditor's report that he has limited assurance on the Council's overall control, risk and governance framework arising from a number of no and limited assurance reports in 23-24. A lot of those are still feeding through the system. They weren't actually presented to the committee in that year, and also as the low levels of savings delivery that the council achieves. That report which was part of the committee's reports in May-June, should be essential reading for all of us, especially those of us in policy committees. At this point, it'd be easy to take advantage of the political freedom that I now have, now that I'm no longer the apolitical chair of audit, and lay into the previous administration their handling of in-year cost pressures, the challenges that they've left us all on committees to grapple with. And while I could do that, and I guess I just did, I do want to make a broader appeal. We take time to recognise the challenges that we face as a council, budget and resource constraints that affect the delivery of our services, both in year and ongoing, and the fact that there doesn't appear to be a white knight on a charger rushing to our aid from Westminster or Bristol North West. As councillors, we could all benefit, though, from a bit of self-reflection from time to time, and that's not actually aimed specifically at one group. So as we go forward, the role of audit will be increasingly vital in identifying weaknesses in our systems and promoting solutions. I wish the current chair, the vice chair and all the members their best in challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And now Councillor to speak on behalf of the
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The committee has considered a significant amount of technical information, and its work has been carried out in a spirit of cross-party cooperation and goodwill. I would like to thank my colleagues on the committee and officers for the support that we have been given. I would also like to thank the chairman of the committee during 23-24, Councillor Brown, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Rippington to that position. I had previously voiced my concerns about the delays in the completion of the Council's annual statement of accounts. Grant Thornton signed off the 2021-22 and 2022-23 statement of accounts during the year. I understand that the 2023-24 accounts are now close to being signed off. So a level of performance that previously would not have been remotely acceptable in the commercial world has now improved to the extent that it is now satisfactory. This is important because the Chief Executive of Public Sector Audit Appointments admitted that late completion of accounts is seriously undermining the financial management, governance and accountability of public bodies. The external audit team appears now to be adequately resourced. However, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy does require local authorities to comply with some rather Byzantine accounting rules. It is interesting to note that in the 2023-24 accounts, the value of the Council's investment in the Bristol Port Company has increased to 35 million from 24 million in the previous year. The port company is a fantastic success story for Bristol. It pays handsome dividends to the council, which helps to fund vital services. This is in stark contrast to when the council ran the docks. In those days, the docks were continually on strike, and it was a massive drain on Bristol's taxpayers. The committee had expected to receive the Colston Hall Lessons Learned report during the year, and it is disappointing that this was held over until after the local elections. The annual governance statement has highlighted the continuing deficit on the DSG, which I think is a massive concern for the council's financial sustainability. At the beginning of the year, the Chief Internal Auditor issued a report which gave reasonable assurance that the council's systems of internal control, governance and risk management were adequate and operating effectively in 2022-23. However, it is very disappointing that the Chief Internal Auditor has only been able to provide an opinion of limited assurance for 2023-24. Clearly, across many areas, there is much work to do to improve this.
Thank you. And that agenda item. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is the Human Resources Committee annual report. This report is also for noting. I'd like to call on Councillor Kaidud to move the report as Chair of the HR Committee.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And as you say, this is for noting, and the terms of reference of the HR Committee requires an annual report to come to this body. And it does focus on last year, 2023-2024. I wasn't involved with that, so I'm going to keep this very, very brief. But I think it's important just to highlight a few things from the report that we're continuing to work on this year. And that's the continued support of our staff-led groups and the constructive relationship we've got with the trade unions on the committee, and they're pretty much part of the meetings when they take place. A point that's come out of it that the Disabled Colleagues Network has raised around the council's failings around providing reasonable adjustments to members of staff. We've made some very good progress this year. There's a new programme of training for line managers rolled out right across the organisation, so we're continuing to work on that with the Disabled Colleagues Network, and I think they would agree that there is good progress on that. We've got some massive skills gaps within the organisations, especially around some of the more professional skills, highways officers, harbour engineers, planning officers. And we're really struggling to compete with the private market for those skills. So we really have to have a renewed focus on apprenticeships, growing our own staff, and that's very much a focus of this year's committee. And also one thing that traditionally councils and local government were probably known for was their family-friendly policies, their flexible working. Since COVID, the private sector on a whole are offering that flexible working. So not only we're not really competing with pay, we're sort of slightly behind or at level with them in terms of the flexible working. So we really need to look into that. And it's been reported in the press that the HR committee put forward a few ideas around 4-day weeks and more flexible working arrangements for staff to attract more people to come and work for the organisation. And one surprising statistic that came out of the staff survey this year, I think most people probably think that the average length of service in this organisation is probably quite high. People think, well, so-and-so has been here 30 years, 20 years. Actually, the average length of service now is 4 years. So almost a term of office for a councillor. And that was kind of unheard of years ago. So it just shows the problem we're facing, trying to recruit people and to keep hold of people as well. But we'll do our best to address some of these issues. So, yeah, I recommend this report. It is for noting, so there won't be a vote on it. But thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to call on Councillor Paul O'Rourke to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you. Yes, I too have not been on the HR committee since 2021. It's very nice to be back onto the committee, and it's great to be working with the same leadership team who have shown great leadership over the years. When I joined the organisation in 2016, the HR committee, it didn't have a very wide remit at all. It was essentially just, sort of signing off pay policies and things. And they've really progressed a lot over the years. I think I'm not going to repeat a lot of what Kai has said. I mean, you've commented a lot of the things that are going really well. I mean, since I've come back from 2021, I have to say I am still banging the same old drum that I was banging in the previous period of my tenure on the committee. And that's about performance management. I think, as Kai says, we do a lot to encourage staff, just for selection and staff retention. And I think a lot of things have been done for that. But I don't think that performance management is being done as well across the whole organisation. It's not being done well universally, and I think that's acknowledged, that that's somewhere where we could really make some progress. And, you know, in these days where we're very hard up, the resource that we have as our staff is something that we really need to maintain and maximise the benefit of. And I think we need a really dynamic workforce. And I really believe that performance management is a tool that makes that happen. So I think that over the next year, what we will be focusing on as part of our work programme is looking at the KPIs, looking at things like staff absences, sicknesses, and developing performance management across the organisation so that we have a staff who feel both challenged and praised. And I think if we do that, then we will create this dynamic workforce who will stay, and we won't have what you're talking about, people leaving every 8 years. So I think there is great work to do, and bring it on. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Councillor Clark has been called away, so I'd like to call on Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In recent years, our committee has regularly delivered this annual report for Council. In my view, it's important because it details the work we do, not just for what the administration or one committee or so, but on behalf of the full organisation. Again, this year, the committee did carry out a number of tasks attached to its remit. And I'd like to flag up the scrutiny of sickness absence, work on the annual staff survey, and our key dialogue with staff-led groups, as Councillor Dudd mentioned. Like the Audit Committee, I do not see our work as party political. Instead, we work on behalf of the full council, and the people who elected us, and seek to ensure our HR policies conform with the practices of a decent modern employer. One area of potential disagreements I like to flag up, and my thanks are due to Green colleague Councillor Tim White for raising this at the last meeting. Over the last 8 years, the Tory group, and to be fair, our Lib Dem colleagues, have voted against annual pay policy, even though we undoubtedly agree with 99.9% of the purely factual content. The reason for this is simple. It claims, in my view, bogusly, that the highest paid member of our staff is paid no more than 10 times that of the lowest member of staff. Frankly, that is an utter mistruth or a lie, frankly, because it ignores the interior managers and temporary staff, who obviously have significantly higher pay, as we heard from a member of the public earlier. We have requested that hopefully this coming year, the HR committee will consider some flexible way of reporting these factors, as well as what we require by law to publish.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eddy, and that concludes Agenda 9. We now move on to Agenda Item 10, which is the appointment of Head of Paid Service and Section 151 Officer. I'd like to move this report and ask the former Lord Mayor to second the report.
I second the report.
Thank you. The recommendation is shown on the screen and report in your agenda pack. So this is an aye nay vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The recommendation is clearly approved. Now, I've had a request to bring forward our adjournment. So we're here, agenda item 11, and then agenda item 12 after the break. It's just gone 7:15. So shall we come back at 25 to 8? Is that okay for everyone? So 25 to 8, back in the room, please. Thank you. Let's move on with the meeting, and we now have agenda item 11, establishment of the committee model review group. I'd like to move this report and ask the former Lord Mayor to second the report.
I'm happy to second the report.
I'm glad to hear that. So now I'd like to call upon Councillor Guy Polk on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you. I'm full council to establish committee model review group. I'm going to do that every single time. I'm really sorry. The terms of reference for the working group are set out in the papers. Anyone who sat on the former working group, anyone who sat in the community engagement sessions knows how important this review is. We've made it into the committee system. It's now our job to make the committee system work for the people of Bristol. The mayoral referendum demanded a new covenant between the council and the city, and we've all, I'm sure, knocked on lots of doors, asked lots of people what they think, asked lots of people what they want. A council that listens, helps people and acts fairly. Councillors that listen, care about their area, work hard to get things done. Parties that keep their promises and put the people they represent first. I heard it on the doorstep when I knocked on doors for Stephen 20 years ago. I heard it when I knocked on doors for Carla a few months ago. I've heard it on every election in the mayoral referendum in different countries and on different continents. The only thing that seems to have changed over the last 20 years is that more and more people say they want politics to be kinder. The new committee model review group will be tasked with deciding how this council works. I'm delighted it will be open to the public from its first meeting. I hope it will be recorded, as all decision-making meetings should be. Thank you, Councillor Dudd, for reminding us all of that, not that long ago. I hope we're not left to call on Dan, and I'd just like to say very quickly that gentleman who made a protest earlier in this chamber, for whatever his behaviour was tonight, has spent a lot of time trying to make this place better, and as frustrating as it can be sometimes, I think it's a bit incumbent on all of us to make sure that we remember that he is acting with very, very good intentions, and he has been very, very good at holding this council to account over the years. I hope this new working group will be collaborative. I hope it will be constructive. I really hope it will empower the communities we represent, and it will empower us as councillors to deliver for the communities that we hope to represent. I really hope it will deliver greater scrutiny. And I hope it will go some way to earning the electorate's trust. I hope it will change this council for the better. And I really hope to see public there. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Tom Renard to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, teething problems at the start of any new governance system. The Committee Model Working Group and the Council did a commendable job getting the Council ready for this change, but it's clear there are some areas where improvements are needed. And we'd have thought we'd offer just a few. I mean, there was a very good local democracy report earlier today, actually, that I would recommend everyone reads, but we wanted to add a few of our own thoughts. Meetings need to be webcast. We need transparency. They're often held in working hours. This limits the number of people and the demographic that can hear directly about the discussion of how policies will affect their lives. My thanks go to the local democracy reporters, because without them attending, the public probably wouldn't have a clue what is actually going on in a lot of these meetings. Now, again, on transparency, there have been some of these behind closed doors informal committee meetings seeking approval for agendas that should be coming to policy committee. These should end. If a report is ready for an informal meeting, it is ready for a formal meeting. These discussions should happen in public. The Greens amended a report on the future of the council tax reduction scheme. The Lib Dems amended a report on the city centre transport changes. Both were accepted. Now, when Labour tried to amend a report on the allotment fees, bringing it in line with what was agreed at Cabinet, it was ruled out. And clearly there's questions of fairness there. Can't have one rule for the administration and another for everyone else. I'm glad we're starting to make progress here, and I've tried to ensure a level of pragmatism in how we approach this in discussions between party group leaders. Policy committees feel like they lack political direction, and councillors on the committee are scrutinising officers who are bringing forward their own proposals removed from a political environment. You may have noticed how much recent press coverage quotes officers rather than councillors, understandably so because they say the most substantial things about policies at the meetings. This isn't great democratically. When hearing a government announcement, we expect to see a minister explaining the policy, not a member of the civil service. The solution could be fairly straightforward. Committee chairs should introduce their papers and field a proportion of the questions to explain the rationale for bringing it forward to a committee. and why it has their political support, and should answer public forum questions. This helps foster a degree of ownership of the policies and lets the public know who the decision makers are. That is, of course, if the Green-led administration is prepared to acknowledge it is in charge. There are a few things that would be easy fixes and would help improve transparency, the fairness and the accountability of Bristol City Council. Now, we want to see this working group set up and we'll be voting for its establishment tonight. We do think it needs more brains in the room, so we're not voting for a group that is 7. We do think it should be 9. Now, on the chair and the vice chair, I see Tory and Green lovings are becoming a bit of a habit. Hopefully this won't lead to more backroom deals with significant ramifications. And, you know, I do have a question. You know, we've got a male chair and a male vice chair. Actually, could we have some gender balance in and who we're arranging? You know, at the moment, we've got a couple of dinosaurs taking this forwards. What could be more important than perhaps the deputy leader of the council stepping into the breach to lead this work? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown now pleased to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Mayor, not quite sure how to follow that, Tom. Anyway, so as a party that brought the referendum motion and advocated for a change of the committee system, we welcome this early review, which we all agreed to some months ago. I'm sure all of us in this room can think of examples of things that we would change and improve from our experience thus far. We also look forward to receiving representations from the public, ensuring that Bristolians can have their say in full as well. I have to say that my experience thus far has been positive, but maybe that's a function of decisions on the economy and skills being uncontroversial thus far. Your mileage may vary, as the saying goes. It's disappointing to see that this paper, though, I feel this paper is incomplete. It's really disappointing that the party group leaders couldn't screw down between them how many members this committee should have, and that we're having to decide it tonight, or indeed have a complete membership list, regardless of how many members there are going to be. At present, it's just me and Councillor Reddy that are going to be in an empty room reviewing the committee system. Now, there are divided views between the party group leaders over the issue of 7 or 9. Frankly, I'm reasonably indifferent, but if push came to shove, I'd support 9. But it just baffles me that we haven't had that agreement before we get to this stage. If the balance of views in the chamber is 7, we're not going to stand in the way of that. Ultimately, this should have been sorted by now. As for chair and vice chair, I've got enough hats already, so I'm not going to be throwing my hat into that particular ring. I'm disappointed to hear that your group has ruled itself out, Tom, actually, because I think a bit of cross-party engagement that involved your group would be really helpful and useful. But maybe you mentioned the press report. Maybe you're just saving your critiques for the press, So anyway, I'm looking forward to this getting established. I'm sure that once we're actually in situ, things will be work in a more collegiate way, or at least I hope that it'll work in a more collegiate way, in the same way as my experience so far on the Economy and Skills Committee has been. So I hope that this little, back and forth that we're having tonight, we can put behind us and actually look at the issues involved on the committee, and seek to address some of the key problems that we've identified thus far to make the system work better for everyone out there, all our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Mark Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Mark.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. First of all, I thank everyone from across the kind words in recent days. Very much appreciated. That's on the personal thing. Right, dinosaurs. It's interesting, isn't it? Dinosaurs ruled the world for hundreds of millions of years. We're still talking about them today. I wonder if we'll be talking about Councillor Tom Renard in hundreds of millions of years' time. Possibly so. Well, you never know. You never know. I love this. Tory Green loving. Actually, the chairman, the chair rather, is gone green. The vice chair has gone Conservative purely because you didn't put anyone up. If you're going to have a fight, get in the ring. You don't just watch from the sidelines. Possibly, maybe I missed it. Maybe there was a bandwagon that just came along and it needed a driver and you were busy at the time. Now, on this thing, the committee system doesn't work perfectly. I mean, everyone will know our preference would always be the leader and cabinet model. That was voted down. We are where we are. And we need to make it work. And what we need to have is a committee system that balances that desire for transparency that we all want, but also the need for efficiency. Because there are times when the city has to act fast. So we need to make sure the committee system is fleet of foot as well as open of mind. So we are obviously going to set this committee up. I think we've possibly reached peak committee level at this point, where we're going to have a debate and a discussion about to set up a committee to review the committee system. But never mind. I think, to be honest, 7 is the easiest, and just so people know, we did have this debate before. 3 parties decided that 7 was an optimal number because it's easy to coordinate 7 diaries, and 1 party didn't. So we would have tried to settle this, but again, there was an awkward squad in the room, so we are where we are. And so we're going to have the vote. I'm obviously going to be proposing Councillor Pulteney as chair, and then I'll be obviously, I think, seconding rather, Councillor Pulteney as chair, and then proposing Councillor Eddy as vice chair, and maybe, rather than complain about it, put someone up. Were there no volunteers? Or was it just political? Maybe there's a press release coming your way. Maybe, and let's see, has it already arrived? Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Let's move on. Circus that's sorting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And can I also add my condolences as well? We've got 3 recommendations, which we'll be voting on each one in turn. So we move to vote on recommendation 1, which is the establishment of the committee model review group. This will be an e-vote, so please ensure you're in your allocated seats so your vote is recorded accurately. So you're voting on recommendation 1, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Mark's father passed away, so he was at a funeral yesterday and sort of drove back today. So that's 56 votes in favour, no abstentions and no against. So that has been carried. Thank you. We now move to the vote on recommendation 2, which is the number of seats on the committee model review group. Please can I have a proposer for 7 seats?
I propose 7, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And can we have a seconder for 7 seats? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. So this will also be an e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. So you are voting on recommendation 2, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Thank you. So that's 34 in favour, that's 18 against and 6 abstentions. So recommendation 2 has also been carried. Finally, we have recommendation 3, which is appointment of chair and vice chair of the committee model review group. Firstly, can I have a nomination for the chair?
I nominate Councillor Guy Portney for chair, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And do we have a seconder for the chair? Thank you, Councillor Weston. Thank you. Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, so we will now vote on the nomination. This will be an e-vote. Once again, ensure you're in your allocated seat so your vote is recorded accurately. So you're voting on the appointment of Councillor Poultney as chair, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Nerd. So that's 36 votes for, 17 against, and 4 abstentions. So that vote has also been carried. Thank you very much. Please, can I now have a nomination for the vice chair?
Sorry, I nominate Vice Chair, Councillor Richard Eddy. I'm just wondering if other people will vote against and not put anyone up. So, Councillor Eddy.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder for the vice chair? Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, so we will now vote on the nominated vice chair. So once again, an e-vote, don't change places. So we're voting on the appointment of Councillor Eddy as vice chair, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. I wonder if Councillor Eddy will get more votes than Councillor Poultney. Well, the same number of votes for, 36, but 18 against and 4 abstentions. So that vote has also been carried. Thank you very much, everyone. So that concludes agenda item 11. Before we start agenda item 12, the motions, if we want to hear both motions, we will need to extend the meeting, but we should still finish before 9 o'clock. So can I just get the flavour of feeling in the room? Are we happy to extend till 9 o'clock-ish? I think that was a definite yes. Okay, we're all gluttons for punishment. So agenda item 12 then. Firstly, the golden motion, which is make Bristol the UK's most accessible city. And the motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. And first, I'd like to ask Councillor Kelvin Blake of the Labour Group to move the motion, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My Lord Mayor, councillors, aldermen, people in the public gallery, yet there's still public, people in the public gallery and those online. I've removing this motion today. This is an important moment for this council. By passing this motion, we put the people at the heart of everything we do. Bristol is a campaigning city, from the bus boycott, statue removal, the mayor vote for and against. We do things differently here, and we've done some things first as well. First, to allow motorcycles in bus lanes. First, to do the Major City Leap project BNet, our own fibre network in Bristol as well. And so it is with disabled people's movement. In the 80s and 90s, the Avon Coalition of Disabled People demoing and causing righteous disruption throughout Bristol in the pursuit of better rights for disabled people. Whilst we have seen modest improvements since then, there's still much to be done. Now, I really don't understand why, often, those in power view disabled people campaigning for rights alongside pressure groups like the Civic Society, Transform and Sustrans, for instance. Now, whilst they are of all worthy causes and they have their place in Bristol life, they're very different than disability rights. It's basically about your disabled neighbour, your cousin or your mother's life. What's more important than that? Now, how big is this problem? Obviously, we've listed out many things in our motion, and the Greens have helpfully put forward a few more things. But would you believe that there are restaurants, locations not that far from here, where there's still no public toilet available for me to use? Would it be acceptable for a sign on the door to say, everyone allowed, but no women allowed to use the toilets in this location? It wouldn't be, would it? But yet, it's still okay for that operation to be in place. And we all find that in this chamber outrageous. But that's my daily life and the daily life of thousands of people living in this city and visitors. So this motion could be the start to change all that. It sets high ambitions for the city. That has a focus for transport now because we believe that will make a big difference to people's lives immediately. But this motion doesn't stop at that. It goes beyond it. And if we pass it today, we can make Bristol the most accessible city in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. So now I'd like to ask Councillor Tate to second the motion, please.
Thank you. I want to extend my sincere thanks to Kelvin for his for sharing his lived experience and bringing this important matter to our attention. His dedication and insight has been invaluable in highlighting barriers disabled people face in our city. The Golden Motion to make Bristol the UK's most accessible city aligns directly with our commitment to a just transition, as outlined in the city's Just Transition Declaration. This declaration acknowledges the need for fairness and equality in our shift towards a greener, more sustainable future, ensuring that no one is left behind, especially disabled and older citizens. Making Bristol accessible for all is not about improving daily life, but about fulfilling our responsibility to provide an inclusive and equitable city for everybody as we move towards our long-term sustainability goals. There is already vital work being carried out across the city, such as the inclusive transport vision developed by Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership. This vision sets out a roadmap for making Bristol transport system more accessible, ensuring that everyone, regardless of physical or mental ability, can navigate the city with ease and dignity. This motion brings on that foundation by proposing practical, targeted action like providing improving our pavements, bus stops and disability parking spaces, alongside advocating for 24-hour Diamond Bus Pass access. Bristol's journey to becoming a sustainable and just city cannot be achieved without removing the barriers disabled people face. These improvements will ensure our transition towards a greener future is inclusive and that everyone has a voice and a role in that journey. I would also like to take a moment to remember our former colleague, Laura Welty, a powerful advocate whose tireless commitment to disability activism left a lasting impact. Laura was a juggernaut in the fight for disability rights, and her work has laid the foundation for ongoing efforts we see here today. Her legacy continues to inspire us, and this motion honours the spirit of her activism by keeping accessibility at the heart of Bristol's future. Thanks, Kelvin.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. There has been an amendment from the Green Group, which has been published online as a supplement earlier this afternoon. I'd like to ask Councillor Ed Plowden of the Green Group to move the amendment.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and I'd like to thank Kelvin for bringing this motion, and I think it was a very good start. Sadness and surprise amendments to the Labour motion. I suggested amendments in good faith to embrace its intentions and make changes which I thought improved it and made it more specific and realistic. These are set out in the papers today, and I'm sad that Labour chose not to accept these, but I would like to start by quoting from a statement sent to all the party leaders yesterday from the chair of our Disability Equality Commission, but he sent them too late to make the public statements today. I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to read the bit that I think is really important. Disability equality says that people who have a physical or sensory impairment, learning difficulty, neurodiversity, or mental health issues are not disabled by their conditions. They are disabled by lots of barriers. These barriers can be physical or economic or political or attitudes. It is up to society to take these barriers away. This is not for debate. It's the essence of the social model of disability. And transport is, of course, a great place to start improving accessibility for disabled people. And as such, I thought this motion was a great start. We need to remember, however, that in considering this motion, it covers a wide variety of needs and not forget that many impairments are not visible or obvious. Indeed, the motor car that provides mobility for so many is not the only solution. I know from my time as Director of Paths for Everyone at Sustrans that bicycles, along with adapted cycles, is used by many as a mobility aid. And actually, moreover, that the many barriers on our cycle paths discriminate against many legitimate users. Let's remember that many disabled people have supported the proposed changes to the city centre as well, as it is intended to make the streets quieter and the air cleaner, access better for all, and increase the separation of walking and wheeling from people cycling and riding scooters. And as for the motion itself, I make no apology for adding what is apparently too many suggestions. And if this amendment is approved, I will be pleased to use it as a checklist and report back. But I do need to manage expectations. Some of the aspirations in there are laudable, but it could be very costly to refit all of our legacy infrastructure. So we need to be realistic about the funding. For example, the Novas Lane question today, it would be great to be able to solve that problem, but we don't have the funding available as things stand. The motion mentions the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnerships inclusive transport vision for Bristol. A few weeks ago, I attended a roundtable about this organised by the partnership and came away thinking that we need to engage disabled people better. So in support of this and the Disability Equalities Commission vision that Bristol will be a great place where disabled people want to live and where they are proud to live, I'm delighted to announce today that I've been working with the Chair of the Commission, with the support of Vice Chair Graham Morris, to set up a transport advisory group. It will be independent of the City Council, and for the next year we'll meet specifically in advance of the committee, the Transport Committee. Alan and I will be jointly chairing this and issuing a draft terms of reference in the next day or two. So I welcome offers from organisations not already identified to be involved, and I'm also pleased
Councillor
to invite
Plowden,
other
can you wrap it up, please?
Participate, and I hope you'll all be able to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Edwards, could you second the amendment on behalf of the Green Group?
Lord Mayor, I rise to second this amendment. The Green Party believes that inclusion and equality should be at the heart of all policies developed by this council and never be an afterthought. And so we welcomed this motion that ensures the social model of disability is regarded in our transport policy. However, we do believe that we could make it a bit better. Our amendment strengthens this motion by addressing the needs of all disabled residents, by also aiming to remove barriers to walking and wheeling. It is not equitable to anyone, especially disabled people, to focus primarily on private car users while ignoring measures that would improve access and safety needs of those who may not be able to drive. This amendment adds those vital measures to ensure disabled pedestrians, the visually impaired and wheelchair users are thought of, with infrastructure measures that have been tried and tested, such as single-colour cycle lanes, the removal of barriers from walking and cycling routes, and separating space between walkers, cyclists and motor vehicles where possible. We really hope that the Labour Group agree with this and also welcome our desire to ban pavement parking, something that has long been a difficulty for disabled pavement users, and join us in formally calling on the Department of Transport to respond to the pavement parking consultation that closed in 2020, which will help this council enforce that ban. The new curbside and parking strategy task and finish group will be happy to look at this and report back to this council, as well as reviewing disabled parking space provision. We also need to be practical and realistic about how we make changes. Unamended, this motion promises a lot, but with little realistic action on how we deliver that promise. We do not want the ambitions of this council to make Bristol a highly accessible city for disabled people to fail. We have to acknowledge that years of inaction and a lack of government investment have put us at a disadvantage. Rather than making just bold claims, we need tangible actions that benefit all disabled road, pavement and cycle lane users in a tangible and measurable way. And I hope this council notes that this is the aim of the amendment and votes for it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Hear from speakers on the amendment. So firstly, Councillor Peat to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you to the councillors for the time that they've put into this amendment. Unfortunately, however, it will not have Labour's support. Whilst a lot of care has gone into it, the original motion is about declaring our ambition for Bristol to be the most accessible city in the country, as opposed to just highly accessible. So I ask, why can't we be ambitious again? Why can't we be the most accessible city in the UK and pave the way for disability rights? The amendment detracts from the vision by adding several caveats. Yes, some of these are most definitely necessary, but they are details that would have been decided in a policy committee anyway. Additionally, and somewhat ironically, the amendment also adds a fair amount of transport jargon, which makes it less accessible for the average Bristolian. As I said, some of these additions are sensible. For example, we fully support standardising cycle lanes, especially around the notoriously dangerous fountains. I'll even offer to paint the first slab myself. However, others are disappointing. Firstly, the original motion advocates for the number of disabled parking spaces to be increased, whereas the amendment just wants to increase their availability. Secondly, the unamended motion commits to having the Diamond Bus Pass scheme be valid for 24 hours a day. The amendment, however, just wants the hours of operation extended. And lastly, the motion proposes that disabled drivers be allowed through bus gates, but the amendment just wants this to be investigated. Our objection is more than just about wanting stronger language. It's about communicating our steadfast support to all who have a disability, be that visible or hidden. From my own experience as someone who lives with hidden disabilities, I know how much courage it takes to ask for help. Fortunately, I am lucky I have an incredible support system that makes it easier. Unfortunately, though, there will be many in our city who are not as fortunate as I. Let's show them that they are not alone, that we care, and that we will be ambitious in providing them with the support they deserve. We in this chamber have nothing to lose by voting for this amendment, but the people of Bristol do. That is why a strong stance is needed to show them just how much we care and how much we are willing to champion disability rights. I hope that you, my fellow councillors, will also vote against this amendment, and together we can make Bristol the most accessible city in the UK, again, rather than just a highly inclusive one. We will, of course, still vote for this motion regardless of whether or not the amendment is passed. But I ask you once again, why can't we be ambitious? Why can't we be the most accessible city? Why can't we lead the change to champion disability rights across the UK? Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Kent on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So looking at the original motion, first off, can I thank Councillor Kelvin Blake for bringing it. We believe that it brings forward some very good ideas. It does set a good ambition for this city. and we think it would be a very worthwhile piece of work for the Transport Committee to undertake. In principle, the suggestions and the amendments are nearly all good ones, but we do have a concern that a certain level of technical amendments have been brought here to the Chamber, which we think would actually have suited more at the committee level. We think what has been laid out in the original motion is a good list of ambitious ideas that they want to see explored more. And that is actually quite clearly stated in the original motion. You're asking to look at these ideas. It doesn't actually commit us 100% to any of those ideas, and clearly some of them have substantial cost, so that would need to be explored. And we do feel that the amendment gets a little too technical in places, and I hope perhaps this can be reflected on in future. The difference between people bringing forward ideas and policy ideas to generate conversation in committee, and then maybe some slightly over-technical amendments, which, to be honest, would be more in place in an officer's report rather than a motion to this council. So overall, as a group, we've decided that we don't feel that we can support the amendment, because we do feel that the original motion is strong and is worthy to go forward to the committee for debate, where in fact most of those ideas you've brought forward in the amendments would be discussed anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I am sure the city agrees that the aspiration to make the city more accessible is absolutely something that we should be doing. In fact, the question could be asked, why haven't we been doing it in the past? So, like the other speakers, I'd like to thank Councillor Blake for bringing it to our attention. He obviously comes from a different perspective to most of us in this chamber. It's really important that we enhance and use all of our perspectives to deliver what is the best that we can for our residents in this wonderful city. One thing I felt was missing from each of these motions was a very specific point, that we have an incredibly large hospital in the centre of the city, and it's almost inaccessible to a majority of patients and residents. There's no buses go by. To access it, you've got to go up hills, and that's something which I think as a city we should look very carefully at, and soon. There must be a place for private cars in any transport strategy. There are positive aspects to the original motion and to the altered motion. On balance, the Conservative Group will be supporting the amended motion because we believe that it will benefit the whole of the city, whereas I felt the original motion was perhaps more centrally focused. Thank you.
Plowden, would you like to respond as move of the amendment?
I'd like to say I think the ambition is, if anything, we've tried to raise the level of ambition here, but also make it realistic and measurable. I think we could waste a lot of time looking at whether or not we're the most accessible city, and I don't think that would be a really useful thing to do, and I don't think it's particularly good for us to compare ourselves with other cities. We've for too long, Bristol's been quite successful, but for too long central government has been asking cities to compete with one another for funding. So actually competing with one another for some sort of accolade, I think we're best off just getting our heads down and making Bristol better for everyone and make sure that what we are doing is measurable. Zoe, although the Labour Party didn't actually include the city centre cycle lane in their original proposals, I won't be putting out a begging bowl for making sure that they are now included and we do improve the legibility of that thing, of that lane. I think I'm going to take on board that maybe it was a little bit too technical, and I'll think about that if amending or writing a motion again in the future. So thanks for that, Tim. But I did really want to bring in the provisions of Local Transport Note 120 because it is absolutely about recognising that there's many forms of people, many forms of impairment, many forms of people disabled by our infrastructure at the moment, and not just focus on, I thought there was a danger that we'd be focusing too much on car drivers rather than the whole range of different mobility needs and adaptations that people need. And I'd just lastly like to reiterate that if this is passed today, I will be using this as my checklist and working with the other members of the committee to make sure that we use this as an active checklist for our work over the next year and come back and report back. So I hope that's something that people will appreciate. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to respond as move with the original motion?
Just very, very quickly, Lord Mayor, thank you. Look, I'm not going to quibble small words. I do think words matter, actually, and the message we send out. There's a lot of good stuff in your amendment, Ed. But I mean, I think that in some respects, I mean, it's interesting for a sort of party that was dead keen on the committee system. You sort of almost wanted to do the committee system work at this point at motion level. There's so much more work to be done. And the other thing I wanted to ensure, and the reason why I think we still should reject the amendment, is I want our partners to be involved in this discussion debate. At the moment, they've had some involvement in some of the discussions I've had with them, but they've been out of this discussion. I want them absolutely right in the middle of this, and I'm glad that you've already announced that you will have a transport advisory group, and they can have that role. So hence, I wanted to leave it without too much technical discussion, as technical input to it. So, but that said, you know, there's a lot of good stuff. I still think that words matter. Saying the most accessible sets us against some cities that are doing some fantastic work in this field and would challenge us big time. And of course, I mean, I think that this is much more about car users, much more about that. In fact, the majority of this is not about car users, actually. It's about the walking and wheeling and public. So I think we should still reject it, but we're doing it on a technicality, but actually it's about ambition for me, which is really important.
Thank you. So we now move to the vote, and this will be an e-vote. Once again, please ensure you're in your allocated seats, that your vote is recorded accurately, and you are voting on the amendment. Okay, and the vote will open for 15 seconds. Okay, please vote now. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's 34 votes for, 5 abstentions and 18 against. So that amendment has been carried. Thank you. Okay, so we will now hear from speakers on the motion as amended. So first I'd like to call on Councillor David Wilcox to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to thank members of the full council for accepting our. It was as a friendly amendment to the Labour group where they deemed the improvements to their motion too complicated. I have some news for the group opposite. Delivering high quality transport solutions for disabled people as part of a just transition is complicated. Getting it right is a priority, not an ambition for the Green Group. The details of this amended motion will be used as a blueprint to design disabled access to any part of our city's infrastructure. We need to provide disabled access as both an equality and a safety issue. The most vulnerable in our society need to be protected from motor vehicles, e-scooters and errant cyclists. This motion goes some way to help with this. I commend this motion to the Chamber.
Thank you. And now Councillor to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you. I speak as someone who, my day job is a town planner. I'll let you into the secret that a lot of the time designers design what they know. which means that often, subconsciously, they design for themselves. This can explain an office worker can easily walk to a city centre pub and then to a railway station, but anyone trying to go to a primary school and then on to a supermarket will probably need to drive around a ring road. It's us politicians, who are famously skilled at empathy, to set the standards for accessible design. Because poor accessibility affects everyone. And this is magnified, of course, for those with disabilities. It affects access to work, education, healthcare, leisure and services, making those arduous expeditions sometimes impossible on the bad days. But conversely, if we get it right, then everyone benefits. A wide and a level pavement is good for wheelchair users, the partially sighted, those with pushchairs, children or pets, people using crutches or walking frames, people wheeling delivery carts or shopping trolleys. Making Bristol accessible is an ambition that we can all support, and the Liberal Democrat group firmly does. Now, the motion rightly calls on policy committee chairs to consider how their policy areas can contribute to improving accessibility. Transport has got a role to play, but it's only part of the picture, which I think Councillor Blake recognised. So spatial planning, for example, that puts homes, healthcare and shopping in close proximity to one another would eliminate the need for many difficult journeys altogether. And accessible space standards for new housing would make city centre accommodation available to more people. The motion's focus on transport, I think, did make it a little lopsided. And as has been observed within the original, that further emphasis on car drivers with blue badges, they would have benefited from half of the original recommendations, while many disabled people choose not to drive or don't have access to a car. So the amendment to the shopping list, I think, has diluted that focus slightly. But for Councillor Plowden's checklist, I've got a few other items, which perhaps I should bring up at the policy committee. So even intensity street lighting, so that'll aid those with visual impairments. A shop mobility scheme, so that people who don't use a wheelchair at home can still borrow a mobility aid when they get to urban centres. Benches, so that those who choose to walk can still take a break to a rest on their journey. Handrails, helping those with poor balance navigate uneven steps or steep pavements. And clear signage for consistent and obvious wayfinding around our city. But, as the motion rightly recognises, the shopping list is not the important part. The detail is delegated to the policy committees. We agree with that in principle and with the core of the motion, that Bristol needs to become more accessible so that all of our citizens can flourish.
Thank you. And now Councillor Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative group.
Mayor, firstly, can I thank Councillor Blake for kindly bringing important. Secondly, can I thank Ed Plowden for, in my view and my group's, tidying up the motion and improving it. The Conservative group would hope that not a single member here would actually refrain from voting for this motion, which we believe is worthwhile and humane, and what a decent city should hope for. One note of caution here. The proposer talked of self-identifying disabled people. I'm sure Calvin believed he was seeking to be helpful and inclusive in precisely the same way that disabled lavatory signage reminds us not all disabilities are visible, but how various disability passes, for example, blue badges, do require documentary evidence, and I think we need to recognise that fact, and it does discourage actually people from abusing the system. Whilst being ambitious for Bristol, personally I am relieved that Councillor Plowden wording commits us to striving to be a highly inclusive and accessible council and not the most highly accessible and inclusive council. I'm all for being ambitious, but I want to be realistic. Moreover, whilst recognising that some councillors here hate the internal combustion engine with a vengeance, May I remind you that for many of our fellow Bristolians who are infirm and disabled, the motor car is an essential piece of life and a lifeline impact, and our transport policies need to reflect that. I do recall telling pro-bike Mayor George Ferguson over a decade ago, I might review my policies on transport, George, when the majority of my retired constituents collect their groceries from Asda in Bedminster, put it on their back, cycle over hilly Bedminster down to Bristol, Bishopsworth. Well, that was a pipe dream then. I think it's a pipe dream now. Finally, it's perfectly fine to encourage level disabled access bus stops, but that assumes they will be used for the purpose they were designed for. On many occasions after my illness, I waited on level access bus stops only for the bus to stop 2 bus stops ahead. All the queue of waiting passengers, including disabled people and parents with buggers, had to rush forward, or in my case, Lord Mayor, hobble forward. Alternatively,
Councillor Eddy, could you sum up very quickly, please?
Very big, would stop right out in the actual road, and one would have to get down to actually approach the bus. Lord Mayor, despite these gripes, I urge members to back this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blake, would you like to move of the...
Just thank you, my Lord Mayor. Just finally, I want to thank everyone for their contributions. I think it's a really important subject and one that will make such a big difference to the people living in this city for years to come. And I'm just going to hold you, Ed. It basically means the country. So I thank you all. I thank you for that, and I look forward to your support in the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now move, and once again, it will be an. So you're voting on the motion, and the vote will open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Thank you. So that's 57 votes for, no abstentions, no votes against. So congratulations to Councillor Blake for that. It's carried. Okay, we now move on to the silver motion on electoral reform. This motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. Now, this motion has been altered, which means that all groups have agreed to it being changed from its original wording, and the altered motion was published today as a supplement to the agenda. I'd like to ask Councillor Stephen Williams of the Liberal Democrat Group to move the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No one could accuse you of the sin of vanity, I'm sure, but you could be forgiven for occasionally next door in the Queen Elizabeth room, looking up at the wall and wondering when the name of Andrew Varney is going to be inscribed in stone, with that list that starts with Roger Cordwainer in 1216. I could think maybe there should be an equivalent list for members of Parliament. But truth is, I'm not vain either, but the truth is we don't know how Roger Cordwainer or John LaTaverner were elected. What we do know is that from 1432 did actually set a very limited franchise for people who are going to be elected. And first past the post was born a very long time ago. It took 400 years before it was slightly altered again in favour of slightly richer men, altered again in 67 and in 1884, and since 1885 we've had the single-member constituencies with which we're all now familiar. Of course, that works brilliantly if there are just two parties. There's just Liberals and Conservatives, as there were at the time, if all constituencies are of an equal size, which we've only got this year in 2024. But over the last 100 years, we've all noticed wild distortions in our electoral results. Let's just look at the last two general elections. And just at the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, for simplicity. In 2019, Labour under Corbyn got 32% of the vote and 202 seats. That's 31%, so it's broadly right. But of course, that is a fluke of first past the post. It's not designed to do that. The Liberal Democrats got 12% of the vote, but only 11 seats, under 2% of the House of Commons. That's wildly, wildly unfair. Whatever you think of Joe Swinson. In 2024, Labour, a triumph, 1% increase in the vote to 33%, but gets 411 seats, 65% of the House of Commons. We go from wildly unfair to wildly generous. And the Liberal Democrats, on this occasion, still got 12%, slightly up, but we got 72 seats, 11%. But again, a fluke, not designed by the system. The Green Party should be congratulated on getting 4 members of Parliament, but with just under 7% of the vote, in any other system in Europe, the Green Party would have around about 44 members of Parliament. Now, every other country in Europe, apart from Belarus and ourselves, has junked this unfair system. Lord Mayor, we're all political junkies in this room. We'll be looking across the Atlantic, I'm sure, in 4 weeks' time. We know in 2000 and 2016, first past the post did not express the will of the American people. Several states are now moving to ranked choice voting. I hope we'll get there soon. In Wales, under a Labour government, that is now allowed, and Lib Dem Powys and Plaid Cymru-led Gwynedd are going to dump first past the post for their council elections. I hope that first past the post will just be for horse races in the future, not for Westminster and not for this council either.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'm my name carved in stone on the wall next door because I don't think I have anywhere to put my headstone. But anyway, that's another matter. Shall we move on to Councillor Tim Kent to second the motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Second the motion. I'll keep my comments short because I know time is late. Obviously, as a Liberal Democrat, I strongly support proportional representation being brought in to our voting system. It brings out fair elections where the representatives truly represent the people they vote for. But I want to address my Conservative colleagues because it turns out that you're not big fans of first past the post either. Today, a certain James Cleverly stormed into the lead. Hold it, but that wasn't the first time your MPs had voted. It was not the second time your MPs had voted. In fact, that's at stage 3. My gosh, you appear to have perverted first past the post. In fact, Mr. Robert Jenrick won the election first past the post. He should be your party leader now. But it turns out he's not. And why is this? Because it turns out you yourselves don't support first past the post. So I strongly look forward to seeing my Conservative colleagues join us all here today to vote for proportional representation, and hopefully here soon the government will listen and allow us as a council to adopt that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. And we'll now hear from speakers on the motion. Firstly, Councillor Rob Bride to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank the Lib Dems for bringing this. Obviously, we support it. And also to Labour for adding to the and really genuinely making it a lot better, really a lot better. So thank you for that. I really do think it improves the motion, and I think that's good that we've got that basis there. People vote differently, in different electoral systems. But if people had voted the same way, and I think Stephen slightly undercut me here with his stats from history, we would, if you look at the top 17 parties in the general election this year, 10 parties would have got more seats in the PR, 4 parties would have got exactly the same, and only 3 would have got less. That's Labour, Sinn Féin and the DUP. So the 3 big winners there, the really big winner was Labour. So it's really encouraging that Labour are apparently going to support this at the local level. I hope that action in supporting it can feed up to the national level, where I think the party membership agrees with you. But perhaps the leadership team does not. Even in the next election, they will probably benefit from a more proportional system. So the other thing I wanted to bring out is the local elections here, and to fess up, under a PR system, again, if people voted the same way they did under the system we have, we would have, on the Green side, 6 less seats. We'd only have 28. Labour would have 2 more, 23. Conservatives would have 3 more, 10. And Liberal Democrats would have 1 more, 9. So, in essence, we are in a position where we're arguing for something that would disadvantage us at the local level. What I think is funny also, that just as an aside, is the Knoll Community Party would still have got 0 seats. The Greens benefit from first past the post in Bristol. It's as simple as that, and we're in a similar position in that sense that the SNP have been in for a number of years in Scotland. All parties now, I think, are benefiting from the committee model, which instills a proportional principle in our governance structure and holds out the possibility that one voice from any party can convince others to make a different decision. It's kind of the 12 Angry Men sort of principle, if you've seen that film, where one voice wins out. Sorry to give that away, it's quite an old film. Would I like... Yeah, we should be okay with it. Would I like to see 93 Reform UK MPs? No, of course not. But do I think that the democratic principle of proportionality is more important than what I personally like? Yes, of course. I'm not naive. I know it requires an about-face from a Labour Prime Minister and Cabinet who have just been elected with a large parliamentary majority that they won't want to give up. But when the polls start to shift downwards for Labour nationally, whenever that is, it will become apparent that their strategically impressive election result is built on thin ice. Only PR really offers the stability we need to ensure that governments are formed around a broad consensus in the country that represents the majority. Labour got 63.2% of the seats from 33.7% of the votes. That's a scandal. It's completely unfair. We need to change it.
Now, Councillor Breckles for the Labour Group.
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to say that we in the Labour Group will be supporting this motion, and we'd like to thank the parties for agreeing to our and the altered motion. As most of you know, I've been an electoral reformer for decades. I joined the Labour campaign for electoral reform literally weeks after joining the Labour Party back in 1992. So, all electoral systems have their downsides, but first past the posts are the most apparent. It's worked in Labour's eye, but that's not always the case. Sorry, I've just lost my place. It seems a bit of a missed opportunity that Labour brought forward 2 motions so far that will change council policy, yet the other 2, including this one, have about things that are outside the council's direct control. However, I really do think, as do many in the Labour Party, that how we elect our representatives, whether here in Westminster, really does matter. It's an issue that's as important as well as how we vote is who can vote. This should be everyone who is eligible. It shouldn't be controversial to say that eligible voters should not be turned away at the polling station. A particular concern to us, therefore, is Boris Johnson's 2022 Elections Act, which imposed voter ID. This led to people being turned away from polling stations as a result, including here in Bristol. It also, without a referendum, changed the supplementary vote used for PCC, mayoral and metro mayoral elections to first past the post, purely because Boris thought it would tip those elections in favour of his party. That kind of thinking is just wrong. Next, we want votes at 16. You can join the military and fight for king and country at 16, and if you're working, you will pay your taxes at 16, so you should have a say in how this country is run and how your taxes are spent. Also, if we get people in the habit of voting when they're younger, then hopefully they will become voters for life. We all know how frustrating it is when we're out canvassing, we come across people who say they don't vote. Votes at 16, we hope, will help to change that, at least starting with the younger generation. Finally, automatic voter registration. If you exist, and we know you exist, you should be on the electoral register. So let's find ways to make that work. So this motion calls for all votes to count, but also to encourage participation by enabling young people to vote as soon as they are 16, and finally to enable my participation by removing barriers like voter ID and registering people as soon as we know where they live. British democracy needs to be fit for the 21st century, so please support this motion. Thank you.
Is ready for the...
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. And now for something completely different. Firstly, I am surprised that Councillor Williams is proposing this motion, given that as a former distinguished Member of Parliament, he served in the coalition government which held a referendum on this very issue. As he will well remember, in the PR referendum of 2011, over 13 million people voted against PR and just 6 million in favour. I believe any attempt by politicians to defy the will of 13 million people is an affront to democracy. From a selfish perspective, PR would suit the Conservative Party. It would give us more seats both at Westminster and in this chamber. If this motion is passed, whilst Sir Keir Starmer would ignore it and not stand down half his MPs, which he would have to under PR, presumably at a local level, this motion will be respected and my group will be allowed to have the 10 members we should have under PR. Looking at the maths, and I think Rob and my maths slightly differ, Stephen, I think you have to hand over 1 seat to us, and Greens, you have to hand over 2 seats to us. So if this motion is passed, no, you have to listen. If this motion is passed, I'll be writing tomorrow morning to the respective chief whips asking which members you are sacking. So please have your answers ready. There's an old phrase in politics, careful what you wish for. PR at Westminster would see reform with around 100 MPs. Look across to Europe and see what PR has achieved. Alternative für Deutschland getting ever closer to power in Germany. Freiheitspartei Österreichs topping the poll in Austria. And in Italy, the neo-fascist Fratelli d'Italia actually heading the government. Nigel Farage says his dream is to become Prime Minister. He won't succeed under our current system. He may well with proportional representation. As for the Labour amendments, I've run these past Sir Keir Starmer. And even though he tried on 20 different pairs of freebie spectacles, he still couldn't see any value in them. He was especially concerned by the unintended consequence of increased voter fraud. He also reminded me that all EU countries require voters to show ID to vote in person, and he doesn't want Britain to diverge from EU rules. In summary, my Lord Mayor, Conservatives believe that referenda results should be respected, however inconvenient the results might be for us politicians. When 13 million people vote to reject PR, when voters say no thanks to PR by a margin of 2 to 1, then I believe we should accept the will of the people. The Conservative group will be voting against this motion, surprise, surprise, even though PR would improve our numbers in this chamber. However, should other members, other groups vote for the motion and it succeeds, then, as I've already said, we would expect 3 additional seats, and I look forward to those discussions. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams, would you like to respond as mover of the motion?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. It's been a very good-natured debate. In fact, all of our debates tonight have been good-natured. I observed councillors for a long time while out of office, and they got increasingly bad-tempered. I think tonight has been an excellent example of maybe the committee system is encouraging better behaviour. I don't know. But I think actually a reformed voting system would really entrench better behaviour amongst politicians, because the public would know that who they voted for would get a voice. And yes, John, that does mean some people who we find unpalatable would actually be in Westminster or would be in our council chambers. John mentioned recent election results in Germany, and particularly the east of Germany. If the Germans had first past the post now, or indeed if they'd had it in 1933, the far right would have won by a landslide, just like Labour have won by a landslide under our current system. It's only actually because they have STV that the extremists have not been overrepresented. But it is important, even if we don't like them, that extremists feel that they have been listened to. And it's because people don't think they're being listened to and the system is against them that more people are tempted to vote for those easy choices. There are lots of systems of proportional representation. Kai, is a question from the floor, what system do I want?
We haven't got time for that.
I'm in favour of single transferable votes, but we could have ranked choice voting to rank all the systems. Ranked choice voting for single-member constituencies, STV for multi-member constituencies, is what we would favour as a reformed system. I'd particularly like to thank Fabian for his remarks. I wasn't aware that he was a long-term supporter of electoral reform, but I'm delighted to learn that today. And I'd like to thank the Labour group for putting forward their changes to the original motion, in particular for votes at 16, something that I've been committed to for a long time, many years of visiting sixth form colleges or FE colleges. I know that young people are engaged, they're curious, and quite often, frankly, they are far better informed than their parents or their grandparents. We should listen to their voices, just as we've done in this chamber at the last council meeting when young people came to talk to us about knife crime. Fabian is quite right. Despite the heckling, people can pay tax when they're 16. They could do something, if they're straight anyway, far more fundamental and bring another human being into the world. So if the state trusts young people, teenagers aged 16 and 17, to bring a child into the world, then why on earth can't you trust them to vote as well? Votes at 16 is something whose time has come. It is only Westminster, an English local government, that doesn't have it, and I hope we'll move towards it soon. Lord Mayor, I hope that the Leader of the Council writes his letter to the Prime Minister. I suspect PR at Westminster will fall on deaf ears, but maybe he'll allow English local government to all of us to make our own choices about what system we want and dump first past the post. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the vote, and this will be an e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seats. And you are voting on the motion, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Thank you. Okay, the votes are in. So that's 50 votes for, 1 abstention and 7 against. So that has been carried. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Councillor Williams. So that concludes the silver motion. Thank you all for attending today's meeting. The next meeting of full council will be held on Tuesday, the 12th of November. Thank you very much.